level 4 or level 3 purple armor all the way down.
Try on indefinite like that. Oh. Mute it. All right, let's try now. Nope. Ahead with it for now. And we will figure it out on the back end. Hopefully, we are at the very least understandable. So we're gonna move into the Divinity Talks. Rabid, what did you think? Oh, it's only robotic for me.
Yeah, fix your dog shit internet, homie.
Well, I unplugged and replugged my mic, so maybe that might work. Let's
All
hear.
right, well, let's just power through it. As long as they can understand what you're saying, I don't think it's terrible if you're a robot.
And besides, the most important one is Rabid, anyways, as we know every single week. Go for it, Rabid.
But yeah, so big things are like it really felt like I don't know. This week was really hard to call, right? Like you had some of the easy stuff, like the BKT win over DTF, but you had a lot of teams that were kind of like they're projecting one way or the other, and so it was really hard to call, like to predict, like for example, like Foxtrot winning, like they were kind of trending downward, right? Like they've been losing the last couple weeks, and they kind of surprised us with a big win this week. Then Echo, like they've been trending upward, but they were coming into like they hadn't really played any of the other powerhouse teams for a while, so it was kind of, you know what I mean. It was really surprising to see them just kind of give it to you guys the way they did.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a bunch of teams that really stepped up to the plate and kind of just took off with it. And then there were also some contested matchups that were going to be really interesting to cover too. TFF versus CG, and then LXX versus AK. Both very, very interesting games that had some pretty big ripples that will spread throughout the league.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, like, why don't we just start at the top? And if you guys didn't see, like, I did post the analysis down in the analysis channel within the Titan server. So if you guys are looking for that to follow along with us, it's there. Bubba, if you want to try to pull it up for the stream, you can too.
Okay, we're gonna go and pull it up for the stream.
But we're gonna start with NSG Pearl versus Oasis Lunar. So again, I predicted Lunar to win because I feel like they have a strong roster. But again, it's another top team.
Rabid, real quick before we get into that, I think you were the one that pulled it up last time. Do you remember the process?
I mean, I think you just pull it up and then...
It is up currently.
I'm not really sure.
Like I said, team, we are absolutely boomers over here. So if you're asking for technological edges, we are not.
Well, I mean, let's just power through it then. They can pull it up on their own screens if they
put Chrome higher. And when we move Chrome higher up.
Oh yeah. I think you're right. So just move it in front of main, maybe.
Maybe in front of the background.
That's not in front. You moved it further back.
Yep. Give me a sec. Team viewer is a object that. Are you messing with it right now?
No. I clicked one thing on accident, but I'm not touching it anymore.
I need to go above the main cover image, don't I? No? Okay.
Well, oh well. So you guys have it available to you within the Titans League analysis channel. Again, we're going to be going over it, walking through each matchup, so you don't need to have it in front of you. You can just listen to our beautiful voices and enjoy it. But again, so we're going to start with the NSG Pearl versus Oasis Lunar matchup. And again, so I called Oasis Lunar to win. You called Pearl to win. Obviously, Pearl won 2-1. So why don't you tell me why you thought they were going to win? Then we can talk about like what actually happened in this matchup.
Well, so I felt that this was a relatively clear-cut one, and the reason I say that is I know that you have a love for Oasis. I know that on paper they are great players that seem like if they are able to come together as a squad, they can probably do great things. But NSG Pearl has just been on the up. I mean, since those roster swaps, since those positional swaps, they've just been absolutely dominating the competition. And Oasis wasn't really an exception. They lost game 2, but it wasn't a convincing win. And overall, it's just that Oasis has not been performing as they we continue to believe that they should. And NSGP has just been there. They've been solid.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like in my mind after watching the matches. So, disclaimer, like this week I actually did the first 4 matches. So I did the Pearl versus Lunar matchup. I did Bucky's versus Dream Defeat, Amethyst versus Echo, and then BDE versus Insomnia. And then Bubba did the other 3. So he did Foxtrot, LCG, Agni Kai XL, and then TFF versus Clown Gaming.
And just so you guys was very kind to allow me to do the most exciting matches of the week, but it should lend to an interesting perspective for sure. That
being said, so this is one of the ones I actually watched myself, and after watching them, it feels like both teams have very, very similar styles. Like they're both relying on pressure. So in Pearl's case, they have Church of Rango in the jungle who elicits most of their pressure. For Oasis Lunar, it's really the Forgotten One who's kind of asserting pressure around the map. Like he's getting a big lane lead. Like obviously Caius Casades does his job in jungle. I just feel like he was a little overshadowed by Church of Ringo in this matchup. But it felt like the game that Oasis Lunar is able to win, right? They're funneling through the Forgotten One, and he's funneling his resources to bot lane. Where Pearl does the same thing, but they use their jungle to funnel those resources into bot lane. And it's kind of the same outcome in both games. It just feels like Pearl has a little more synergy doing a very similar playstyle. But I think both bot lanes for both teams are actually very strong. Like you have Boca Dog with Scrambles, and then you have Sex Goddess with Andromeda. So, I mean, that's really where both teams kind of focus a lot of the resources for the late game, right? Like they're both just kind of waiting for this team fight to let those guys pop off and hoping to have enough of a lead before that happens that they can be impactful as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really interesting to notice because you were talking about the bot lane here. Something that's really interesting to notice is that they both had similar score lines when they were winning, and they both had similar score lines when they were losing. They both did extremely well in a winning sense, and then they both did extremely poorly in a losing sense. So it seems that it maybe the way to get ahead of Pearl and or Oasis is to either set their bot lane ahead or behind, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the way to beat either of these teams is really just focus the bot lanes and get your bot lane ahead of theirs, right? Or just take their bot lane out of the game completely. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The other matchup. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say when you talked about the Forgotten One, and I'm fully on board with you that the Forgotten One is an absolute unit of a player. You look at the 3 games that they played. The first game it was 19 kills to 5 in favor of Pearl, but the Forgotten One had a scoreline of 3-3, and absolutely was able to maintain his CS, was able to maintain himself as far as the gold went, but just wasn't able to pick his team up and carry them. Whereas game 2 he was legitimately the reason for the carry. 10-2 and 12 scoreline on the Syndra, just showing off, and then game 3, a similar result to game 1. So Forgotten One definitely a big part of any success that Oasis is going to have in the future, just not being realized right now.
Yeah, and then the other position I really want to talk about was the top lane, right? Like I kind of hyped this matchup up a little bit because I really wanted to see where I'm the Savior sits in relation to the other top laners, because he's put up some performances where he's not really getting gapped by the top end, but then he ran into Zeratul this week, and Zeratul kind of gave it to him. Like Savior was never able to get a lead on Zeratul at any point in the series, which kind of tells you a lot about like where he sits in the power rankings, right? Because I feel like Zeratul is a competent top laner. I don't feel like he's a dominant top laner.
And I'm in the same boat as you. I think that Zeratul is that top laner that is reliable, if that makes any sense. I don't think he's
just the journeyman, right? Like he's just the guy that's going to be there and help you out.
He hasn't had. Oh, Lando's saying both of our mics are awful, and we're sorry, Lando. We're doing the best with what we got, but these boomer mics, man, they just can only do so much. That being said, though, as far as Zeratul goes, I feel that he is, as we've said, kind of the journeyman. He's not often the reason that the team wins, but then again, he's very rarely the reason that the team loses. And it's that stability in the top lane that has led to some relatively decent success in Pearl against some of the harder matchups.
Yeah, I mean, again, other than that, there's not really a lot going on, right? Like you have Church of Ringo funneling bot lane in games 1 and 3. You have Forgotten One funneling bot lane in game 2. And it was just kind of a similar play pattern in all 3 games. Yeah, I'm sorry, Lando. We're boomers. We don't know how to fix stream side problems, really. We'd have to bring in help and delay the stream even longer than we had already. So we're just going to try to power through it for right now.
Figure out a way to fix this in the future.
Hopefully next time we can have it fixed. But again, so like Church of Ringo was obviously Pearl won 2 out of the 3 games. So I'm going to give it to Church of Ringo. He did a really good job in the early games, really forcing the pressure and really just getting those early ganks ahead. I do want to say that in game 2, Church of Rango really had a rough time trying to get a lead. Like he just couldn't get anything going. Um, so that is something to look at for future teams that play against Pearl. Is like maybe if you focus him out, like that's kind of the weakness that you can press on. Like obviously he's a strong player; it's not going to be an easy thing to do. But for the player match, I did give it to Church of Rango just because he was so impactful in games 1 and 3.
All right, moving right along. What was the second game that you ended up
Second game
bringing us?
is Bucky's Troposphere versus Dream Defeat. I think everybody knows at this point what my feelings are about Dream Defeat. So I'm not going to discuss that too much. We'll just kind of talk through the game, right? Um, so it just felt like BKT was kind of just playing that role of gatekeeper, right? Like they're just kind of the team that's going to punish the lower ranked teams that don't have it really put together yet, and they're going to struggle against some of the upper level teams. And that's kind of what this matchup showed, right? Like you had Vandrel kind of popping off in the early game for DTF, but again, just there's not enough going on elsewhere. In the mid lane, they just like Chicken just kept running down, like Chicken and Smitty JT were just running Solanine fucking off the map. Like I'm pretty sure Solanine got solo killed about 6 or 7 times by somebody, and then the other like 9 deaths that he had were just Sermis coming to mid lane or Chicken coming back to mid lane, just over and over again, just punishing Solanine. And they just built up such a big lead on the Graves mid for Smitty JT that I don't think there's really any hope at that point for Vandrel to carry. Again, Vandrel was playing Draven top lane, so I don't, you don't have a lot of faith in that once you see that happen. Game 2, Chicken didn't start off nearly as fast. But again, he did, like, him and Sermis were just roaming the map together, and they just started trashing DTF, and DTF really struggled to deal with the pressure after, like it feels like DTF is in the game up to like 10-12 minutes, and then after that point it's just kind of over.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like DTF plays obviously to have fun, and that kind of lends itself to an early game competitiveness, followed by a sharp decline during the mid to late game. So.
Yeah. For play of the match, I have Chicken. Chicken went 26, 5, and 30 over the 2 games. So I mean, he was showing up. You know what I mean? He was definitely the biggest reason why Bucky's had all the pressure that they did get for that match.
Yeah, and I don't think that we need to say too much. I mean, Bucky's, as we've already identified, seems to be the gatekeepers of Divinity, and I think it's a role that they wear very well right now. As you mentioned last week, I believe it was last week, Chicken seems to be a positive replacement to the jungle that they had previously, and maybe he is what catapults them into the higher echelons.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he can start contesting, like maybe with him there, Bucky's can start transitioning into that team that we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season, right? Because a lot of people had them higher on their rankings at the beginning of the season. So maybe they can start contesting for that 5th, 6th spot in the league.
All right, moving right along to the best match of the week. Should have been streamed. Kind of happy it wasn't.
Okay. So NSG Amethyst versus P247 Echo. Again, so this is one of those matchups where we're like, Echo is kind of on the cusp of figuring it out, where you guys have already kind of figured it out, and then you guys just, it felt like, for me, it felt like you guys tried to match their team fighting with a team fight comp game 1, and they just kind of outdid you. Like, you guys just never really got into the game, and if, you know what I mean? Like, they met your team fighting comp, you guys didn't really have a strong early game comp game 1. And they kind of punished you for it, right? Because they were able just to scale into the mid game and then just beat your asses in the mid game with those team fights.
I mean, I think that's accurate. I think that game 1 especially, coming from the playing side of it, a lot of focus was given to the top side, and a lot of punishment was put into a relatively vulnerable laner, or relatively vulnerable champion, and they played it extremely well. Xin Zhao ended up getting ahead and having a massive lead and causing a lot of pressure everywhere on the map. And with that acceleration that they got, they moved into that strong team fight that they are known for, and just ended up being able to sweep game 1.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally like game 1 was just team fight into team fight into team fight. Game was over, and it didn't feel like you guys really had a way back in at that point.
I think that's pretty accurate.
Game two, I liked your guys' comp a lot better. You guys really focused on taking that early game, like a lot of early game picks to try to pressure the laning phase, and it felt like you guys were really doing that in game two. And you guys were like, you guys had a big lead. I think it was like 12-3 in kills at some point. You guys were up like 4 or 5K, and then you guys won an early mid game team fight, but then you guys threw another one where you gave over 3 shutdowns in one fight. And those shutdowns, if I remember correctly, like one went to Lando, the other ones went to Echo's bot lane, which is Kisubi, I believe.
Mhm.
And Kisubi is no slouch. Like he's a quality ADC. Um, and by giving them the shutdowns, it just kind of gave them the power back in those team fights, right? Like it just kind of evened out the gold back to about 1.5K, where you guys were still in the lead, but it was a lot closer at that point. And then it was just like you guys kept trying to team fight him again instead of going for a split push, or it just felt like you guys were trying to go like head to head with a team that's just known for team fighting, and you guys just weren't up to the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely accurate. I think that game one, it was just an early game diff. They managed to get a lot of early leads, and then game two, it felt more like a team diff than a team comp diff more than anything else, as they just had a lot of engage that was really powerful and could survive a long time and threaten the back line, and then a lot of backline defensiveness in the Zaya and the Cassiopeia, and a lot of damage for them as well. So they managed to be able to kill our front line before we were able to kill theirs, and their front line was able to threaten our back line better than ours was able to threaten theirs, and that was just kind of the end of the story once we got into those team fights.
Yeah, so something interesting that you just said was you felt like Echo actually had a gold lead in game one. Did you actually go back? Did you go back and review the match at all?
I think we reviewed the match. It was one of the ones that we were most interested in, I think, because it was
So
one of the
I'll
ones that
tell you, like I watched it. You guys were actually ahead in gold by about 1 to 2K, all the way up until about 16, 17 minutes.
Yeah, and it just ended up, like I said, being more of an. Oh wait, you said game one or two?
Game one, you guys were actually ahead in.
Whoa.
You guys were still ahead in gold for the first like 10, 15 minutes of the game. You guys
That is
actually
relatively
had
surprising.
you guys had a slight lead, and then just they were able, like that's what I was saying. Is like I feel like it was you guys gave them time to scale without pressuring them, even though you guys still got a little bit of a lead just because your dominant CS numbers. They still kind of just punished you, but it's kind of interesting just to hear your take from playing in the game that you felt you were behind the whole game.
Well, at the very least, maybe I'm talking about the top lane, because top lane just felt kind of doomed. I don't know what the gold graph would be there. I know I was up in CS, but I also know that I gave over 2 to 3 kills in the first 15 minutes, and I guess the rest of my team was trying to carry me as hard as they could and weren't able to pick me up, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then something I do want to say about game two was you guys actually got a huge lead on photography after that game.
Mm-hmm.
And so you guys were 7-0 at 11 minutes, and Photographer Raptor himself was 5-0. And I was really, really disappointed in the fact that he wasn't able to carry that game. Like he had no impact after 15 minutes.
And I think a lot of that comes down to the champions that he was playing against. He's playing against the Jarvan, who, I mean, if you watch one of
Jarvan
the
was
fights,
focusing him every fight. Like Jarvan was
Yeah.
going through your team to get to him, and nobody was really able to peel him away.
yeah, and that was something that we were hoping the Seraphine and Varus ults would be able to take care of, at least to some degree. If you watched one of the fights around the Dragon Pit, Varus and Seraphine both ulted across him, and he was brought down to probably about 250, 300 health, and then he EQ'd through our line to our back line and Gore Drinkered and was up to probably about 15, 1600 again. And that was kind of the moment when we knew that we were in a bit of danger.
Yeah. I mean, Lando was on a tear that series though. Like he was playing very, very well. Like he knew exactly who to target to kind of just take you guys out of the team fight every single time. So that being said, like I gave Claire the match to Lando because it felt like just game one he didn't really play super aggressively. He just kept his laners from falling too far behind. And then game two, he really just like he was getting pressured, but in the team fights, him killing your carries is what won them the team fights pretty much every time.
Agreed.
All right, so
Moving on to Insomnia versus BDE.
Yeah, so this is another one where it kind of felt like you had two teams where like you felt like Insomnia was kind of had the chance to kind of were going upward, where BDE was going downward. BDE made some roster changes this week, and it seems to have worked. Man, they came out and actually like again, it was a 2-1 win for BDE, so they did drop a game, but I mean BDE looked pretty good in the game they won.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the BDE wins were much more convincing than the Insomnia wins.
Oh, true.
Excuse
Yeah,
me.
the win that Insomnia had was very, very close all the way to the very end. It came down to the last team fight.
So with that being said, you think that BDE's change, which I think was both the bot lane, the ADC, and the support, is going to be paying off in the end?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it didn't feel like their bot lane was that impactful. Like, I don't know what happened. It really felt like it was more of like Trisco and Yanks coming back to the same page. I know we've talked a
Mhm.
lot about how I feel like Yanks is a quality jungler, and it relies on Trisco doing well. And Trisco in this series really showed that he could actually play some other champions other than just Echo and be successful. And I feel like that was really the big issue here is like Trisco was really putting the pressure on mid, and it was translating to the rest of the map.
Yeah, I mean, previously we've spoken about Trisco, and we've said that Trisco is the carry of the team, um, and Yanks enables him. So I'm very happy that they stayed away from the Kassadin, as it allowed Trisco to play a champion that had a lot more
Well,
early
I
game
mean, funny that
relevancy.
you say that. The game that they lost was actually with Trisco on Kassadin. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that their wins they stayed away from the Kassadin because it
yeah,
allowed Trisco to play a champion that hurt early game relevancy and could allow Yanks to gank for him successfully and actually do a little bit of setup to help.
yeah, I think that's kind of their key to success, right? Like they just need to have that prio pick with a strong early game mid lane. Otherwise, they're just going to struggle the whole game. Like Yanks has to have that kind of safety blanket of being able to go mid when he knows he can't get anything else. Because that's kind of what happened game two in the game they lost is Yanks tried to go top lane, he died on the gank, then he tried to go bot lane, he died on that gank too, and he just snowballed the two lanes that you don't have your carry in. You know what I mean? He snowballed the other two team, like the other team got their top lane snowballed and their bot lane snowballed by Yanks in that game. And that was purely because he had a cast in mid lane that he can't gank, right? Like it's just impossible to gank a cast in lane. I don't know who like I mean, if you're a challenger player, come tell me I'm bad, but I just don't know how you gank a cast in lane.
Or if you do gank a Kassadin lane, all of the gank power has to come from the jungle with very, very
Yeah, I
little
mean,
being
it's
added.
literally just the casted and just queuing for the cleanup. You know what I mean? Like, you're
Mhm.
not getting anything added from having a casted in mid lane when it comes to ganking. I do want to say game three, Yanks and Simply BD were kind of just taken out of the game by both teams. It really felt like that was the one game where it wasn't solely around them. And that was really where Trisco kind of shined because he just put a fucking hurting, just put a hurting on Salmon in that game.
Yeah, and that is one of the powers of having a dedicated carry or somebody that you can rely on is that even without a massive amount of jungle pressure, he's still going to be able to show up and perform.
Yeah. And then I do want to shout out to Isodak. He actually played very well this series. Um, he wasn't doing anything terribly flashy, but he definitely had some moments that kind of won his team some team fights. So,
Okay, so let's move. Who was the player of the match for you?
the player of the match was Yanks because I mean, again, this is kind of the same thing as what we talked about with Lando, right? Like he's kind of the the reason his team was able to be successful. Like even though he was struggling to really snowball himself that game in game three, his pressure mid lane is what kept Trisco in the game and getting a lead. So
Yeah, I mean Yanks is one of those jungles that you've raved about, and it shows when his mid laner is able to be there that they're able to have a really good game. So hopefully we see more of that in the future, and hopefully that new bot lane is able to enable them further.
yeah, it'd be nice to see. So let's move on to P247 Foxtrot versus LCG. So this is the one that you actually did,
hmm
and
Yeah, I'll take both.
we were both wrong in our predictions.
We were. I knew that it was going to be a little bit closer. I knew that Foxtrot had potential. What I did not know is that Foxtrot made a relatively significant adjustment. They
Yeah, they made
moved.
a big roster. They made some big roster swaps this week.
Yes, they did. They moved their former jungle down into the bot lane. One of their former bot laners into the mid lane, and their former mid laner into the jungle. Am I correct?
Yeah, so I've actually I've talked to Faint a little bit outside of just normal channels, and he's an ADC main, so it's not a surprising move for them to have done it. It was just a little, you know what I mean? Like it worked really well, and Well Mercy had kind of been struggling to support, you know what I mean? So they move him up to mid lane, and it just really kind of put it all together for them. Is you know what I mean? Like
hmm
it's just really solidified their lanes.
No, I agree. I think that it definitely looked much cleaner than it has in the past, and it is likely that this is going to pay dividends off come going in the future. I bet you that they move up in the rankings a little bit. Um, that being said, game one was just honestly a team comp diff. It was absolutely a team comp diff in my mind due to the cohesiveness of what Foxtrot was able to bring. Of note, the specific lane that I liked the most was a lane that a lot of people have been watching and or raving about in the league communities, which is the Lucian Nami lane. It's absolutely oppressive.
Oh, it definitely is.
And it went into another oppressive lane in a Morgana Caitlyn. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's kind of
when you're
like the classic, just like shit on somebody lane, right? Like you hit the snare, you hit the trap, and you're just stuck in place for 4 seconds.
yes, it is. And another thing I want to note is that Foxtrot's team, Foxtrot's bot lane was not going against a slouch. We've consistently said that Muddy has pretty good mechanics and is able to take care of himself pretty well. His support seems to not int as much per se, but it's more of it has some difficulties with the gameplay. But Muddy himself is an absolutely fantastic player, and for Foxtrot to come out and smash them in such a convincing way in lane, it just kind of shows that they have a lot of potential with Feint moving over there.
Yeah, I think Feint is actually a very, very good ADC. Um, like I liked his jungle as well, but it definitely shows that ADC is his main role, and he had a lot of impact down there.
Especially game one. Um, that being said, I will say that Feint and his support need to make sure. I don't know how to pronounce it, so that's why I'm not really saying
I
your
think
name.
it's like Nyx, I believe.
Nyx? Okay, we'll go with Nyx and yell at me if we're wrong. But Feint and Nyx, they while they are a good 2v2 into the opposing team, like they performed extremely well, they also are relatively gank prone. They don't have the best map awareness, and it seems like if Prattles is he's doing well in the jungle, but he may not be tracking the jungler as well as Feint was previously, who seemed to kind of have that level of understanding of where the opposing jungle was going to be at all times.
Yeah, for sure. Again, Prattles was another move I was kind of surprised about. Like he'd had so much success in mid so far this season, but I mean, again, it feels like it worked. So you know what I mean. It's hard to criticize a move that works that well. So
Yes. And then the final thing I want to say about game one, or I guess it's kind of a two-part. The the bot lane was the dominant side of the map. The reason they were the dominant side of the map was not only because they just pressured them so excessively with the Lucian Nami, but also because Prattles came down bot so often. He came down bot enough that he completely shook the opposing LCG team into not taking any fights really, even though there was a Morgana Caitlyn, which you would assume would be much more aggressive. Uh,
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure Caitlyn's supposed to be the counter to Lucian, right?
and maybe the old Lucian, but it seems like with the Nami, even if she nets him, he's able to just get on top of her and continue to really punish. But
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
Morgana
maybe.
Caitlyn should be pretty much a counter to any lane.
Maybe you
So
just have to target the Nami in that matchup and just
yeah,
take out
it's
the
very
Nami.
possible. Now going into game two, though, I think that this is kind of where one of the weaknesses of Foxtrot showed up. So game one, San Sereno absolutely punished the top laner for LCD, Germrat.
Yeah,
Absolutely punished. It was a
I was
set
kind of
into a
sad
Maokai.
because if I
So
knew Violet Rain wasn't playing the series, I
mhm.
probably would have said Foxtrot would have won 2-1.
Yeah,
Would probably have been my call, just because I think Violet Rain absolutely dumpsters a lot of match. Like he's shown
mhm.
that he's one of the top 4 or 5 top laners in the league.
No, agreed.
After
I think that
messaging him, it just I found like he was at work, so you know what I mean. Like you have to put life first. It feels bad sometimes for your team, but like we
that's just the way
understand
it
that.
works.
It just yeah, like Germrat, yeah, definitely got gapped. It felt like
Especially, I mean, going into a matchup or a laning matchup where it's set versus Maokai, you kind of just know it's going to be bad. And it was everything that you would think it would be, in that it was horrible. There was a massive CS difference. There was a massive kill difference. I mean, at the end of the game, Germrat had 6,000 gold in a 25-minute game with San Sereno bringing in 12k. Now,
yeah,
as much as I'm singing San Sereno's praise about game one, while he is not the single hand reason that he lost game two, he is a massive contributor. he attempted to do the exact same thing that he did game 1 in just pushing in constantly, and he got punished. He was ganked multiple times by the mid jungle and top lane combination, and just fell down time after time in the early game, letting LCG get a pretty significant early lead.
I mean, that's kind of what you see when it's what you see when teams have dominant top laners, right? Like you're just you send the pressure up there, you send it over and over. It happens to Altazi, it happens to Conquerors, it happens to you. Like if you know your top laner is going to struggle, you send all the pressure, and that's kind of what happened. Is they didn't really respect Sancerino game 1, and Jermac got bullied for it, and so game 2 they're like, all right, that's not what's going to happen this game. We're just going to send all the pressure there. Jermac, all you got to do is just don't die to him until the pressure comes. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of what happened.
And Eastside Luke is kind of the hero of game 2. The man was an absolute maniac on Xin Zhao, just being everywhere at the right time and causing the right pressure in the right place. Even though Feint and Nyx ended up getting, I'm going to hate saying that over and over again, I'm sorry. Even though Feint and Nyx ended up getting the Lucian Nami combo, he was absolutely stunting any of their ability to play aggressively and was just everywhere that he was not wanted. So with that pressure that he was able to get, he almost single-handedly carried the game with some assistance from his mid laner, Fubuki.
Yeah, I mean, Fubuki's somebody we haven't really talked about a lot. I don't know. I feel like he's kind of been the weak link for their team in general. Just so it's kind of good to hear that he was having a successful game, because it feels like he has struggled to really win any matchups in mid lane. Like you never really see him getting any solo kills. Every once in a while you see him get out on a roam, but you know what I mean? Like he just hasn't had much impact so far this season. So hopefully he can find a way to replicate that, you know what I mean, and do that in the future and kind of give his team a little boost up.
Yeah. And Sancerino's kind of getting hit with the top lane meta, I guess, in that they find a champion that he's good on and they kind of just stick him on and make him play it as he played Set all 3 games. But I guess you can't complain since he had a really good game 1 and 2, or game 1 and 3.
Yeah, I mean, Set's kind of one of the staple just blind picks for top lane right now. You know what I mean?
It's
like
gonna be
he has a couple not great matchups, but none of them are terrible, and he has some really good matchups. So it's just a safe blind pick. It forces people off of some of the stuff that they'd want to play. You know what I mean?
And he's gonna be relevant at pretty much every point of the game.
Yeah, I mean, and who doesn't love just getting slapped for like 1700 true damage on one ability?
Absolutely. All right, moving into game 3. This was the closest game of the series. I mean, Foxtrot again had an insanely good draft. I'm just going to set this up for you and actually talk about, or actually recite the draft, because I want you to see how cancer this would be put to play into. Set Hecarim, Galio, Vayne, Lulu. Just imagine trying to play into that and figuring out what you're going to do, because it almost sounds like, you know, a Protect the Cog comp, but it was just so effective, like so painfully effective.
I mean, it just feels like you need like the Trundle top lane to deal with the tanks, and then you just need some way to get to the back line, right? So you just need, like, this is a game where Fubuki probably, you needed Fubuki to have a good game, and you needed to have him on something that can get access to the back line. Whether, you know what I mean, some kind of assassin like a little Blanc, or you put a J4 in the jungle and put Trundle in the top lane. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to have a way to get to the back line with that type of comp and really just blow up the carry. Like, if you kill the Vayne, their damage falls off drastically, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they are a relatively low damage comp. The Set in the Hecarim did end up building a little bit of damage, but Vayne was definitely the main carry when it came to, and the Galio did as well. He built the can't even remember the name of the old GLP. What is GLP these days? Can't remember the name of the ability, but it's the Frostfire. Everfrost. Thank you. He built Everfrost, so they had 3 Bruisers and Vayne on the team, so they had a relatively decent damage spread, but Vayne was definitely the hard carry there. Now, that being said, even though they had
this is just a comp where, like, I think you have to get Fubuki on something that can get backline access. Without him having backline access, your team just falls apart, right? Like, you need Luke. Like, if they're playing triple Bruiser, Luke has to play something has to play Bruisery. So the only real option to the backline at that point is a J4, and I don't even know if he plays J4. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of other junglers that have that option to get to a backline. So you needed to get your mid laner on something like a LeBlanc or a Yone or just somebody that has that ability to get to the backline and no real way to answer it.
Yeah, and while this was such a disgusting comp, Foxtrot showed a lot of weakness in this game 3, in that they were just getting picked constantly, over and over again. For some reason, there was always one person on their team who was off on a different part of the map who was getting picked by a relatively grouped LCG, and that made this game extend out extremely far until Foxtrot finally decided that, hey, let's just play as a 5-man death ball, push it up the mid lane, fight for objectives, and ended up winning the soul and closing out a game shortly after a Baron fight.
All right, so who's your player of the match for the series?
Player of the match was actually relatively hard this game because the jungle and the ADC both provided so much to the team, and the rest of the people were relatively solid as well. But I had to give it to Feint. He absolutely popped off on the Lucian game 1 and the Vayne game 3, so he takes it. He carried his team to a victory.
All right, well, let's go to Agni-Kai versus Limitless Excel.
Your absolute favorite game of the week, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it was fantastic.
No, it was a banger. You guys, it was a clash of the Titans. Ha! Get it? Clash. Okay. Yeah. All right. It was a clash of the second and third place teams for dominance over the challenger role, and it was close game 1 and game 2. Game 1, Agni-Kai came out extremely strong. Altazi, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of ganks up towards Altazi on the flashless Kled, but I wasn't the most happy with it just because it was an Orange Trundle. And Orange Trundle, while relatively powerful, they have some pretty decent burst damage. They are not the most beneficial to have gold on, if that makes any sense. Maybe the goal was to keep Altazi down and make it so that the Kled didn't have a lot of relevancy later on, but I felt like the pressure could have been put in better positions, and it just never really worked out. There was the first blood that was immediately done on Kled, and then there were multiple repeats that just didn't really pull much.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
Mhm.
I mean, again, like, this is the team I coach, and it really feels like again, you have to keep Altazi out of the game, otherwise he will just carry it for your team. It doesn't, like, he's a house, Chitin's a house, Jungle Isn't Ruined is a house, their bot lane is good. Like, it's definitely not an easy team to plan for. Again, I feel like you probably would have got a little more out of trying to get Buckby ahead in mid lane and trying to just, because Chitin does love to just kind of push the lane all the way up. And Chitin, it didn't feel like Chitin really got punished that often for it.
True. I mean, he was also playing Tristana, which is relatively hard to punish. But the aggression that Chitin...
You have Trundle, though. Like, you just drop... Like, if you have...
That's very true.
You can drop that pillar right in the middle, and it just interrupts the jump. So, you know what I mean? Like, there was a potential to punish him for being up there. Because if that pillar comes out, she's dead. Like, she
Absolutely.
doesn't... She has no chance of ever getting out at that point.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, though, is that even with not getting much jungle attention from Aethan, Buckby actually had a relatively good performance into what is traditionally a relatively cancerous lane, which is Tristana.
Oh yeah, like, I do want to call out, like, his Vel'Koz was clean, and but I do want to say, like, Chitin was very predictable that game with his, like, he jumped in a straight line over and over again. A couple times he ulted a little early, whereas if he waits to use the ult as an execute, he probably gets a kill there instead of just dropping him to 150 health. But that being said, I mean, Chitin's a great player. Buckby's a great player. It was a fun matchup to watch, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The biggest problem I had with the whole game 1 was the fact that we drafted a more of a late game comp, right? Like, we had a Twitch, we had a Vel'Koz. I don't remember we had Trundle jungle, you know what I mean?
And then we had for the trinkets.
So we just have, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a bad, like, it's not going to get run over early game, but it was definitely more of a late game skewed comp. And LXX definitely tried to play it as more of like an early get a big lead and then try to stop the game, which just didn't work for that comp, especially against a quality team like that. Like, maybe against some lesser competition, that style works with that draft, but they just got punished for it.
Yeah, and Jungle Isn't Ruined, despite not having the best scoreline, was a relatively big factor in that game, securing a lot of neutral objectives, making proactive plays pre-6 on Diana. So good play by him as well. At one point there was some
I mean, I do want to
weird...
say, like, Aphid did run his ass down in jungle on that Diana like 3
Oh
times.
yeah, twice. Absolutely
Twice,
demolished
yeah.
him on Diana. But
So,
it was weird because then it kind of established this weird vertical jungle, which forced the Trundle to be ganking top, and then made the Diana focus the bot lane and the dragon more. So it was a weird situation that Diana kind of found herself in, and managed to kind of pull herself out
yeah, I mean,
at
don't
the
get me
end.
wrong. Like, Jungle Isn't played a great game. He was definitely in the right. Like, he was definitely very good at just like understanding, like, hey, I can't fight the Trundle, so
Hmm.
let Trundle do what he's gonna do, and I'll take everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we spent a lot of time on game one, which was one of the closer games because it felt like game two was
Yeah, game two
relative.
was definitely LXX got the lead and kind of kept the lead for most of the game.
Hmm. And a lot of
Um,
that came from a massive, massive lead that Conquerors was able to get. You know,
yeah,
Tasby on the GP. I honestly believe that Graves into GP is probably one of the biggest counters in the game.
yeah.
Um,
There's no like Graves has no. There's no counterplay to it. There's nothing like Graves just
yeah,
runs your ass down. Like if you step out like 3 steps out of turret, you're just dead. Like
you're dead
Graves,
and you can't farm and you can't get barrels and it's just the worst feeling ever. Yeah, I will not be looking for that matchup in my life. But while Conquerors was able to be absolutely massive, Jungle Isn't Ruined tried valiantly. That man on Amumu was an absolute menace. I think he was either
yeah, I
7-0
mean,
or 7-1
Amumu
at
was
some point.
ridiculous that game.
Yeah,
Like Amumu just needs to be banned. Like if your opponent plays it, ban that shit because that shit's broken. He does too much damage for being a full tank.
absolutely. And
Um,
his double stuns were big. His ability to soak up the damage and then still build a Zhonya's hourglass. He was an absolute terror in that game. That
yeah,
ended
and I
up
mean, I
being
do want
dealt
to
with.
say like Toop was also very effective that game in game two, especially. Toop was super effective. Like he got out of lane early. He was pressuring Jungle Isn't Ruined,
Hmm.
even though like Jungle Isn't Ruined was still ahead, but he was still like they were still getting pressure on him, forcing him off a couple camps here and there.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like yeah, Jungle Isn't Ruined was still getting good ganks off and still like getting a good lead for himself. But the rest of the map, Toop was just like Toop came top lane a couple times. He
Yep.
came mid lane a few times. Like Toop was everywhere.
No,
I do want to say I feel like Buckby made game 2 and 3 a lot closer than like I feel like game 2 is just a runaway game if Buckby doesn't just walk into the jungle by himself 2 or 3 times and get picked.
no, Buckby definitely seemed to kind of have like
Yeah,
it
I
felt
think
like
he
he was
kind
kind
of
of giving in the pressure because Chitin on the Yone was consistently fighting him on the Ziggs and effectively beating him time and time again, and it just felt really like a lot of the pressure was starting to get to him.
yeah, he definitely kind of like game 1 he looked really good into Chitin and
Hmm.
then games 2 and 3 he just kind of folded a little bit and it like it feels bad to say that about my own player, but you know what I mean? Like sometimes it happens, you have a bad game. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
just have to bounce back and keep going, but yeah,
That being said, I would like
he
to give
definitely
another.
made some mistakes where he was getting predicted on his roams and stuff and
Hmm. I
he
would like to give
he
another
got
shout
punished
out to
for it.
Toop. So I know he got punished.
Oh, just you know what I mean? Like he just got predicted. Like they were just predicting where he was going, and he got punished for it by not
Hmm.
having the vision ahead of time.
Yeah, and I do want to give another shout out to Toop. You already mentioned it, but the man was an absolute madman. He was everywhere he needed to be and everywhere that the enemy team did not want him to be. Just landing hook after hook, forcing out flashes, forcing out every kind of summoner imaginable, and still making it out, and then coming back to help pick up the kills. So if LXX had won the games and if he'd had a solid performance in Game 3, I probably would have made him or named him as MVP just because of the massive effect he had across the whole map.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, getting into game 3, it seemed like Conquerors really liked that Graves pick and wanted to go back into it. But I don't know the pick order. I didn't actually look at that, and I should have. But
We actually were flexing the Graves, and then we just had some trouble in draft where we were
gotcha.
just like late on a pick, so it just ended up going to him. Like we didn't actually want that matchup, but
Yeah, the Graves into Kennen seemed like a bit of a bad matchup. It wasn't like he fell behind or anything like that, but he definitely didn't get the
he just
really.
didn't have the impact. He just couldn't get a like you know what I mean. Like if
Mhm.
you're gonna play Graves top, you have to get a lead, and he couldn't generate a lead against the Kennen because Kennen just wouldn't allow it, and then Kennen had more impact in team
Yeah.
fights.
Now, I'm by no means am I saying that Graves was a problem this game. In all honesty, it felt like it was a bit of a mid diff. Chitin just
Yeah,
went insane.
again, like I feel like Buckby just after game 1, like game 2,
Mhm.
it just he started like Buckby just started coming apart a little bit, and you could kind of tell like he got Buckby walked into the enemy team 2 or 3 times early on, and then it just felt like his mental was a little gone at that point.
Yeah.
Um,
And that being said, though, it was a relatively quiet early game. There weren't any deaths until 11 minutes, and then all of a sudden there were just a bunch of deaths and
yeah,
a
it turned
bunch of
into
the
a bloodbath really
onto the
fast.
Corki. Yep.
Yeah, and again, like that's like Chitin on Corky is a known quantity. Like we know he's good at it. We banned it games in game 1. He didn't pick a game 2, so we thought maybe he wasn't going to try it for game 3. And honestly, we got Buckby on his best champion, which is Ari. And so we're like, all right, that's a good matchup. You know what I mean? Like Ari into Corky's not the greatest matchup, but it's not a bad matchup either. You know what I mean?
And I could also see how Buckby could have played the matchup in that Ari just has insane wave clear, and she could just wave clear him in, get roam timings, establish vision, threaten side lanes, and it just felt like the CS numbers were heavily weighted towards Chitin on the Corki. I think he was up by 30 CS relatively early in the game, all the way through the end. And I don't know. I guess it just ended up being a difficult one, a lot of mental strain. Now, while the mid lane was a big contributor to the way the game state went, I honestly give a massive amount of props over to Warhead. Warhead did everything that Toop did game 2, except he did it on game 3 and Leona. Just absolute insane rotations, was rarely in lane since he didn't really need to protect the Tristana. It was just moving everywhere and was an absolute force multiplier anywhere that he went.
Yeah, for sure. Like Warhead definitely had probably the best game I've seen him play so far this split. And like you said, he was doing everything Toop was doing, and he just did it on Leona. Like he was all over the map. He was in every lane. He hit a lot of like really clutch ults for some of the team fights to really start him off, and just give Agni Kai those openings to really just start a team fight, take somebody out of the team fight, and turn it into a 5v4. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The final thing I want to shout out about this series is that Agni Kai seems to be really good at closing a series out. I mean, the first game they closed it out in 24 minutes. We'll say 25 because of rounding. Second game, obviously LXX won, but the third game they closed out in 27 minutes. So both wins against a very, very good team in LX, being closed out in under 30 minutes. They're a powerful team, and they're somebody that is already known to be powerful and should be watched.
Yeah, if you look at the average game time for that whole series, it was really low compared to every other team. So it's kind of weird with both teams being as close as they are, where like every game, like the average game time for that series was like 28 minutes. So
Altazi's letting us know it's a bit quiet. I think what he's trying to say is speak up and tell him how good he is.
Yeah, I turned it up just a little bit, so it should be all right. All right, let's move on to the last game.
Yeah, let's just real quick shout out to Warhead, player of the match. I think that Warhead played zillion games 1 and 2 and had really good performances even in the loss, and then game 3 was just the absolute dominant force in the team that really set his team up to win. So moving on to TFF Aftershock versus Clown Gaming, another one that was a contested prediction, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I've been kind of going for the underdogs a little bit.
Yeah.
Just because you know what I mean? Everybody likes to see the underdog come out on top every once in a while.
And you look so absolutely cool when you are right when the underdog wins. Like you absolutely gain a bunch of cred, and then you don't really lose a lot of cred if that prediction's wrong. That being said, CG was in the upper standings and definitely had the opportunity to make a really good showing against TFF. But man, did BTG show up game 1.
I didn't actually I didn't get to watch these games, so I mean, I'm gonna leave it to you to kind of describe how the games went, and I'll just give you my impressions after.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll just tell you guys about the BTG monster that was game 1. I mean, let me get there. BTG ended up playing game 1 on Lux, and when he was playing Lux, the rest of his team was having a really tough time. This is one of the few games that I have seen Diablos actually struggle in the early game. He seemed to be having not too much luck going around the map. It seemed like CG was kind of had him visioned out, or were respectful enough of the possibility that he could be on that side of the map. They started roaming as a 4-man pack and just taking out kills all over the objectives because because Sem's never really left top lane in the season 10 Survivor. Was just matching him on the Shen. So obviously, if you're having 4 people at an objective with a Shen on the other side of the map, you're having 5 people at the objective.
And I mean, that's kind of like, I know Sems has been like, I'm a better top laner than these other guys, but I mean, if you're not there for the team fights, you're kind of just a detriment to your team, right? Like, it's one of the things you have to do as so I forgot to say, so Dempsey messaged me saying you got games 1 and 2 backwards, I believe.
Games 1 and 2 for BTG
For
versus
TF for CG versus TFF.
BTG. My goodness, I apologize.
So yeah,
Let me
TFF. So
hold on, let me take a look real quick just to make sure that I'm speaking intelligently on this. So we got Clown. Okay, so Clown won game 1. Got you. Okay. Got you. Okay, so Clown won game 1 with Sems on the Mordekaiser. Okay, got you. So game 1, we'll go from top to bottom. Game 1 was actually a relatively intense game that Diamandis and Induce were able to bring back. So I'm gonna throw this at you, and I think it's gonna end up being something frustrating again. Induced yet again popped off on a different role than he played last week.
yeah, but I mean, he did play ADC 2 weeks ago.
Previously, so are we gonna start
Yeah.
throwing him in the rankings, or are we just
Yeah, I
gonna
threw
leave
him on
him
the
out of it?
rankings. I feel like that's kind of like his home. Like that's where he's going to go back to, even if they keep moving him around every once in a while.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because that's where he's the starter on the roster. So I think they just kind of move him where they need him if they need to move him. But I think he's just a bot laner at heart. So
Yeah. Well, so the
um,
difference here, this game was kind of a difference between, I mean, IQ of a Coconut on Ezreal, everybody knows he's going to have at least a decent scoreline. The man's never going to die, but he's also kind of one of those qualities where if he doesn't start popping off, he's not going to be insanely effective. That being said, I mean, it was just kind of a story of the mid laner versus everybody until Induce was able to get back into it. And Diamandis really showed up and put the hurt on BTG, honestly.
yeah, I mean, I'm really a fan of Diamandis in the mid lane. I think he's really quality. The fact that he was able to do that to BTG says a lot about him as a player.
Now, BTG by no means fed. It's just that he didn't get the pressure that you would think of when you think of Ziggs into any kind of melee matchup. Ziggs into any kind of melee matchup just pushes you in constantly and never gives you the opportunity to get out of lane. And that's what BTG did, except Diamandis kind of stopped that. He was constantly he was constantly dashing in and out, trading onto BTG, forcing Diablos to come mid and then dashing right back out. And while Season 10 Survivor got his, Tom Kench that everybody memed about and was able to put the hurt to Sems, who had Mordekaiser, which was a bit of a surprise to me, by the way. Diamandis and Induce were just so powerful going into the late game that Induce was soloing the Tom Kench while the rest of his team was taking the fight to everybody else. The one surprise, honestly, is that the Tom Kench, the Season 10 Survivor with Tom Kench and Diablos on the Zac weren't able to affect the fights as much as I thought that they would be able to.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like TFF really thrives when Diablos is on a carry champion, like a Viego, a Xin Zhao. You know what I mean? Something of that ilk where it's going to have a lot of pressure and he can do a lot with his own lead. Whereas when you're playing Zac, like, yeah, you can build a lead for yourself, but it's just not, you know what I mean? Like getting 10 kills on Zac is not the same as getting 10 kills on Viego.
I would also make the argument that he ended up going the wrong rune choice because he ended up going Aftershock instead of Conqueror. And in my mind, Conqueror would have been more useful in this team.
Yeah, I mean, I would have had to actually watch the games to see how long team fights were going on for, but yeah, I mean, if they're going on for any extended amount of time, obviously Conqueror is going to give you a better result.
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, Diamandis with his crit items and Induced with Kraken Slayer were able to just shred through the tanks before they were able to get killed. And CG was able to navigate those team fights and just absolutely knock them off. But man, I hate having to mention this, but not everybody on the team for TFF did extremely well except for Pop Tart. Game 1. Pop Tart ended up getting picked a total of 8 times. Maybe not picked. He got picked multiple times, going in and placing vision that he really didn't have any reason to be there. And whenever some of the team fights were happening, it ended up being a 4v5 because of that initial pick. So it was a really tough game for Pop Tart game 1, and it was looking like it might end up being a CG win based off of that.
Yeah, I mean,
that being said,
if that was their game 1 and CG just came out like that, yeah, I would definitely have been worried if I was TFF. It looks like they were able to turn it around.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I was really getting into it, and then Athena was really, or not Athena, but they were really kind of remind me that game 2 is when BTG popped off on the Lux, and I honestly thought that game 2 was going to be the end of it. I thought Diablos was struggling. The bot lane was struggling, even though they weren't really feeding kills. Induced and Pajama Party were able to really get a lot of pressure and a lot of leads, and it just kind of looked like it was going to end up being over. But BTG on Lux was just everywhere across the map that they needed to be. They made a TP play bot lane that got a kill and saved his bot lane, and then they made a roam with Diablos into the top side of the map to go for a Herald play that was a perfect prediction of where the opposing jungle was going to be. And he just ended up being everywhere he needed to be, getting insane picks, getting insane kills, and doing insane damage on Lux. Everybody knows how annoying a really, really fat Lux can be, and really just picked his team up by their boots and carried them to a win.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I've started playing Lux again for the first time in like seasons, and I don't know. I feel like she's in a good spot right now. She's strong, man. Like, I play her support and I just go full AP, and I still just one-shot carries. Like, it's disgusting.
Yeah, she's insanely powerful. Her combo is insanely smooth, and I mean, BTG put her back in the talks as a real mid laner again.
Yeah, I mean, BTG is a quality mid laner, man. Like, I know some of the top, like, I know Buckby is like, who is this guy? And I'm like, the dude's good, man. He puts up good numbers every week. He's on good teams. Like, there's a reason the teams he's on are winning, and it's because he's a quality player.
Absolutely.
So,
now, game 3 was the TFF mid jungle combo. I mean, they really showed up in game 2 and were able to make some good rotations together, but man, did they punish Special Ed in game 3. They were just constantly moving into the jungle together and constantly either taking away camps or getting kills or summoners, and that was really just kind of the moral of the story when it came to game 3. I think that game BTG actually got an unofficial penta at one point as well, which is how Quirky got to be as strong as he was, or BTG on Quirky.
Yeah, I mean, Corky is another one of those picks where, like, he's not really in the meta in the pro scene right now, but in a league like this where it's just like he has good damage early and he just scales crazy for the late game, and he gives you a lot of objective control with his package. I feel like it's a pick that's going to have to start getting banned a lot more often in the league, just because it just offers so much. Yeah,
the package is such a powerful tool, and BTG used it so well around all of the Drake timings. That TFF managed to stack 4 Drakes in a row, and then an Elder fight happened, which TFF ended up winning, and they ended up just walking straight to the Nexus and winning the game. So it was a relatively cut and dry way of playing. Nobody really had an amazing pop-off play except for BTG and Diablos moving into the jungle together, although Season 10 Survivor on the set really kind of showed up, and then IQ of a Coconut obviously on his Ezreal showed up during team fights.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the real threat of TFF, right? It's just like they have these players that have all these one tricks. Like, how many one tricks are you really going to ban if you're trying to play a game plan, right? Like, you can't come out here and ban S10 Survivor set. You can't come out here and ban Brand every game. You can't come out and ban Ezreal every game. You know what I mean? Like, there's just too many things to have to ban for this team, and I feel like that's the real threat. Is like, you have to take away the Viego, you have to take away the Ezreal, you have to take away the Brand. Like, where are you going to get any other? Where are you going to be able to dictate how the game is going to go through draft against this team? And I feel like that's the real question that, like, teams like Agnikai and LXX are going to have to ask pretty shortly, right? Like, those matches aren't that far away.
Yeah, and I mean, with TFF with IQ of a Coconut getting Ezreal all 3 games, and even in the loss having a decent performance, it just kind of shows that.
I mean, I said it last week. I'm going to say it again this week. Don't give the man Ezreal. Like, if you want to try to punish bot lane, do not give the man Ezreal. Do not let him have an easy out. Force him to play the lane and punish him for it. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, BTG is a little more flexible. S10 Survivor obviously can play more than just set, but if you give these people their one tricks, like the ones that are their comfort picks that they want to play, they're going to punish you for it. You know what I mean?
And the result of those 3 games was that BTG ended up being the player of the match, and TFF went on to remain undefeated with a 2-1 victory.
Not right now.
So let's move into the team power rankings real quick.
Who was your player of the match?
BTG. BTG ended up taking it for me. The man was just an absolute carry.
All right. So yeah, let's go to the team power rankings. So I actually let you do the power rankings this week, and I figured it would give us something to talk about. We have about 20 minutes left.
Well, let's make it quick then, because we still got to get
Um,
into the player power rankings too.
Yeah, so let's but I agreed with everything you said in the team power rankings. I was like my rank, like I did my own separate rankings before I looked at yours, and they came out the exact same. So
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing here that's too surprising. I think some of the lower teams, maybe you could have an argument that one deserves to be over the other, but with the way that everybody's been playing, I don't think that there's anything that is insanely surprising to anybody, and everything can be argued one way or another. There's not a ton that we need to jump on here, but is there anything specific that you want?
I mean, obviously the top got shook up a little bit with the LXX and Agni Kai
Mhm.
game, along with Pearl winning. You know what I mean? So that bumped Pearl up to 3, LXX went down to 4, Agni Kai and TFF are still 1-2. Clown Gaming, I was a little surprised they didn't go anywhere even with the loss.
Well, I think that they didn't go anywhere because
But again, you have
NSG
the teams
Amethyst
behind
ended up
them are
dropping
like
out.
Amethyst, who lost.
Yep.
You have Echo, who record-wise just isn't quite on that level yet. So you know what I mean? It makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at
Uh,
Clown Gaming's loss, they ended up losing to TFF. So while they did have a loss, it doesn't necessarily. If Amethyst had won, I think that they would have moved down. But since Amethyst didn't win, Clown Gaming stays where they're at.
yeah, for sure. The other one I was a little surprised about is that you actually pushed Oasis down that far.
Hmm.
I feel like they probably still edge out BDE or LCG in my mind.
See, I'm hoping. So with BDE for me, my thoughts are that Yanks and Trisco have demonstrated that they can play well together, and if they keep Trisco off of that Cassidon, I honestly believe that combo could be insanely strong.
Yeah,
Their
I
bot
mean,
lane switching out is something that I think could be beneficial to them.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think their bot lane got a little more stable. I don't know how much better it got overall,
Mhm.
like talent wise, but
Yeah,
it's definitely a much more consistent bot lane from what it looked from the matches that I watched. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
and
Like
I think that
they're not going to get gapped. They're not going to really gap anybody,
yeah,
but they're solid players. They know how to team fight. They know how to stay alive. So
and something that I had mentioned last week is that with Oasis, we keep hanging on them and talking about how strong they should be and how good they look on paper, and they just don't quite perform.
yeah,
And
I mean, I also want to point out the fact that right now, as of our power rankings, they've played the first, second, and third team
yes,
in a
yes,
row with their new roster. Like they're literally playing the top of the league right now with their new roster, which is kind of unfortunate for them.
very true. So I think that they still have a lot of leeway. I think that they are the wild card in my mind of the lower part of the bracket. But for now, I'm just going based off of the results so far, and BDE had the results this week.
Yeah.
Mm,
Other than that, I don't really have anything else. It feels like Insomnia Rising really has to fix some things
yes.
quickly, otherwise they're really gonna you know what I mean. They're obviously they've played a couple of decent teams, but they've also been losing to a couple of the lower end teams as well. So they really need to kind of start do what BDE is doing and kind of start the trend going the other direction and pick up some wins, even if it's just one game. You know what I mean? One game in a best of 3. Like start picking up some wins and start really getting your energy going the other direction.
Yeah, gotta swap that, gotta flip that mentality around. All right, we moving on to the positional rankings now.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, so the top laners got shook up a little bit. So Altazi standing in the top lane, man won convincingly. Was a huge contributor to why his team ended up beating one of the other top teams.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Altazi should stay there. Like, obviously, Conquer's had that one really good game where he kind of gave it to Altazi, but
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that just really solidifies Conquer's spot on the top, right? Like, it's not really. I don't think you can really give that as a knock against Altazi. Like, I think they're both quality top laners. They both played very well that series.
Yeah,
So,
and
like,
Altazi
1
even
and 3
came
seems
back.
good.
Altazi even came back and had a bit of relevancy later on in the game. Obviously, during the laning phase, he was pretty much useless. His GP ultimates weren't really effective, but once he came back into the game, he had a couple of decent plays. It just wasn't enough to stem the bleeding.
Yeah, and then obviously S10 Survivor, like, he's just a solid top laner. Like,
Yeah.
again, he keeps getting that set pick. He's going to keep performing on it.
Keeps getting that Tom Kench pick. He's going to keep
You know what I
performing
mean?
on
Like,
it.
Yep. So Conquer, you know what I mean? Like Conquerors didn't perform well enough against Altazi to really move past him or move up. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's just that's how it's going to be. And then in 4th, you have 3 Little Pigs, which I also agree with. I think he's really shown up the last few weeks for Echo. I think he's one of the big reasons why they've kind of had the big turnaround that they've had.
Agreed. Man seems to have gotten a little bit of something in his Wheaties that is making him powerful right now, and I think that he's a good pillar for his team to lean on.
Yeah, for sure. 5, 6, and 7 are kind of where I differentiated with you a little bit. Like personally, I think you should I think bubagamps should be higher than Zeratul. Just from what I've seen of Zeratul, like I mean, we kind of discussed this a little bit before stream, right? Like where I think Zeratul is the journeyman. He's never really like who out of this top 7 is he beating in lane?
Yeah, no, true. We fully agreed on that. I think
he just gets. I feel like he just gets punished by all these all these really really skilled top laners. He makes some good team plays. He has some good team TPs. He's usually there for the team fights, which I really like. Which is why I say he's one of you know what I mean? Is like right on the edge for me of like 7, 8, 9, like in that range. But I've also seen him make some really bad TP plays. I've also seen him over push his lanes when he thinks he has an advantage and just get punished for it. He's been the solo. Like I feel like the games that Pearl is losing, like even when they're winning their series 2-1, the games that they're losing, a lot of that goal differential is coming through Zeratul.
Yeah, and that's something I mentioned is that Zeratul is not the strongest laner. He cedes a lot of the pressure. He gives up a decent bit of CS to other laners to make sure that he isn't in a position to be punished. But the thing that he does relatively well is he shows up for team fights. He shows up to make sure that they have, the number advantage or that they have, number parity. And that is something in and of itself. He has realized that he doesn't need to be the carry for the team. He can be that solid journeyman status that is going to keep everybody moving.
Then next we have you at 6. Like for me, I would probably have pushed Zeratul down to 6 and have you right above him. So I would have swapped you two. Again, it's just more of like, yeah, I think Zeratul was a little bit better at getting to team fights than you are sometimes. Like you definitely focus on the split push a little more than he does, but you're also far more dominant. Yes, I understand. I'm in the middle of something. Please.
Hit diff.
But you know what I mean? Like you're just a stronger laner. You're stronger. Just in general, I think you impact games. Obviously, you're not impacting team fights quite as much as he does because you focus more on the split push part of it. But what you're doing also helps your team win. So I would have you a little higher just based on individual skill in the laning phase.
Okay, and that's the fun thing about having multiple analysts is that we all have different takes and we all have like different things that we see and weigh a little bit differently. But,
and then 7th you have Pineaholic. Why don't you tell me why you have Pineaholic there?
So I think Pineaholic had a really, really solid game, and he's in that role where him and his team are in that position where they are the gatekeeper, as we keep mentioning. He does really well against some of the people, and he does not as well against others, and I think that kind of puts him in the 50th percentile. He is that top laner that seems to do good against the people who are in the lower brackets, and then seems to do a little bit worse against the people who are higher up on the list.
Yeah, and I mean, so one thing I brought up to you before this was like, if we put Sems and him face to face, because that's who I would have 7th. I would have Sems in 7th, because like if you put Sems and Pineaholic, put him face to face, what are you getting from Pineaholic that you don't get from Sems? And I think Sems is just just edges Pineaholic out across the board.
Very true, and I think that I took the loss that they had to TFF a little bit too much to heart, because it's hard to keep that vision, I guess, that distance when that game was such a difficult game for Sems. So overall, I think I agree with you. I think that we could move Sems into 7th and it would be perfectly placed. I also think that Pineaholic is going to be competitive. I think if he plays against Sems and has a better showing, then I think that Pineaholic moves up into that 7th position and keeps it. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, again, like I just feel like at this point in the season, like if you just look at the stats, like Sems just puts out a little bit, like, you know what I mean? Just like he just edges them out. Like his CS numbers are just a little bit higher. His kill participation is just a little bit higher. It feels like he has a little more competition against the top.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like just that little edge. So.
All right. Well, what about jungle? I mean, I'm really surprised with the first place jungle player right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would still say he's in the MVP conversation for sure.
Agreed.
He's a quality jungler. This was probably the worst worst showing for over multiple games that he's had so far. You know what I mean? Like he's dropped a game here or there previously where his team suffered for it, and this was the one where somebody else on his team really stepped up and carried the game when he was struggling. So
yes, and I think that's kind of like
being said, like the fact that his team still wins even when he's not having the best performance says a lot about him.
Yes.
Then you have Jungle Isn't Ruined and Afen is 2 and 3. Again, they faced off against each other this week. I agree. Like Jungle isn't like I don't know. Like they're very even. It felt like Afen definitely in the one. Like if it was just in a bubble 1v1, I think Afen probably edges him out. But based around like the team and the shot calling that's going on, you know what I mean? Like his team won, so leave him at 2.
Yeah, I mean, it goes a little bit more into the win. It goes into the pressure that Jungle Isn't Ruin had across the map. He seemed to be really responsive to how Afen wanted to play the game. Afen got a couple of solo kills on him uh, in his own jungle, and he started
Yeah,
playing a
and he
lot more
was good.
respectfully and just completely non-contesting. And then when he was on a champion that could contest, he was just really powerful. So I think that I agree with what you're saying, and that Afen demonstrated he can take it to Jungle Isn't Ruined and can play it at the very least on the same level. I just think that the edging out of the win kind of
Yeah,
keeps
for
Jungle
sure.
Isn't
I mean,
Ruined
I
second
agree
place.
100%. And again, like if it was like we were talking about mid lane here, where we're matching up and Afen does that to somebody, you know what I mean? Then Afen obviously gets the edge. But this is jungle, right? Like jungle is all about like impacting the map, impacting your team. And if your team's not winning, then you know what I mean. There's something going on.
Jungle diff, that's it.
Next, we have Church of Rango, who again is we've talked about him. His team is winning because of his switch to jungle and just the way he pressures the map and just plays through Mocha. Same
Yeah,
thing
and
happened again.
yeah, and it seems like he's a shot caller. I would really be interested in listening into their comms, because I know that moving Shugo into the mid lane, it seems as if they have a lot of really good synergy, and my assumption is that Rango causes that synergy. I would be, like I keep saying, really interested in listening to those comms and seeing how that relationship ends up working out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it'd definitely be nice to be a fly on the wall sometimes, right?
Hmm.
Again, so like for me, it's the 5, 6, 7 spots where I'm a little I don't disagree. Nightmare Hall should be on the list. I just don't know if I would have them in the same order. I would
Yeah,
have probably pushed. I probably would have pushed Lando up to 5, in my
I mean,
opinion. Nightmare Hall 6, just
with his
you know what I
showing
mean.
last week, it's very arguable.
You know what I mean? Like Nightmare Hall is a good player. He didn't show poorly in your guys' match. Like I don't feel like Nightmare Hall was the reason you guys lost it or the reason you got like you know what I mean. I don't feel like he was gapped in the jungle at all. I just feel like Lando performed very well this week.
Hmm.
And again, it's one of jungle is a position where the team lost, so a lot of that does fall to the jungler.
Yeah, agreed. I think that there
And
could be
then
a swap.
for Chicken, like I agree, Chicken should probably be 7th. Like he doesn't have a long enough track history yet in the league to really merit putting him higher yet. But he
Yeah.
showed up this week. He had a really good game, albeit against the worst team in the league at this point.
Yeah.
So we'll see if he can continue the trend. Where, like, I mean, 2 weeks ago, again, his team didn't win, but he seemed to have an impact on the game. So we'll see if that just keeps occurring throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see the direction that Chicken goes. I think that he could be what brings BKT back into the top part of the brackets. But we will see going forward. On to the mid lane.
Yeah, so mid lane again, we have Chitin, who just really put in work against Buckby. Again, game 1, Buckby played with him. It felt like him and Buckby were on a very even playing field. Chitin wasn't able to generate any advantage against him.
I would have even given the edge to Buckby, by the way, because
yeah,
of the
just
way
by
that lane
staving
played
off
out.
the aggressiveness. Yeah, like for
Yes.
sure. Like Buckby definitely had more impact later on in the team fights than Chitin did.
And you could see the frustration that Buckby was putting into Chitin, in that, there was a time that Chitin tried to do his combo where he puts the bomb on him.
He tried to dive that turret and he got punished for it. So
And he got punished for it there, and then he tried it again. He flashed over the knockup that Vel'Koz has and ignited, and I think Buckby ended up living with a little over 250 health, so it wasn't even close.
Yep. Yeah, he definitely.
So you can see cracks in the Chitin armor, but I mean, overall, you're right. He performed.
Yeah,
he showed up
Buckby kind of fell apart games 2 and 3. Again, I still think Buckby should be on this list. He showed he can play with Chitin, who we are ranking number 1, right?
Yes.
The next big matchups you're really going to see are really with, like, because I think Rendleman's already played against BTG, right?
Yes, he has.
So you know what I mean? Like, so the top, like when it comes to the top, like the next big matchups you're going to have are like Diamandis and like Buckby, Chitin, Rendleman with Chitin and Buckby. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or I think actually Buckby and Rendleman already played.
Yeah, I think it's right. Rendleman, Chitin, and Diamandis will play eventually.
Yeah. So again, I agree with BTG. He's been really performing lately. He's just like, as they say in soccer, been in form. He's just playing well. Like, I don't know if individually skill wise he's actually better than Rendleman or Buckby or Diamandis, but he's been, you know what I mean. BTG is performing, so
Yes.
you have to reward the people that perform. That being said, in my personal rankings, like you have Rendleman third. I feel like while Rendleman definitely wasn't the reason you guys lost that game, he definitely could have had more impact. He felt like he got kind of like, especially with the Seraphine pick, he had very little impact in that game.
Yeah, and that's something that was communicated after the game, and I think this kind of comes back to his performances against the top laners or the top mid laners so far. When he played BTG, he absolutely, I don't want to say dominated because we ended up losing to them, but during the laning phase,
Yeah, I
he
mean,
was.
Rendleman definitely showed well against BTG.
Mhm.
That being said, I think Diamandis has shown, you know what I mean? I think Diamandis showed very well against BTG as well.
True.
So in my mind, I would have actually flipped Rendleman and Diamandis and left Buckby at 4.
Okay. No, I
Um,
could definitely see that being put into place, and that like we said, that's where the multiple casters coming in, different valuations on different things plays out, and yeah, I could see it happening.
and again, like Diamandis just showed well this week. Like he did, like he played against BTG, who were ranking number 2, and he did well. Like he never, like again, Lux had a lot more impact in the game where BTG went off with Lux,
Hmm.
but it wasn't against Diamandis, right? It was against everybody else on the map where he was really throwing his impact around.
Yes.
Um, with that, you have Shugo Tenchi at 6th. We were kind of like, this is one of the big like contentions between me and you. Was the Shugo Tenchi on 6? I don't like. I feel like he got absolutely gapped by the Forgotten One this week. Even though his team won, like the Forgotten One, just I felt like just outplayed him. He out CS'd him. Just had more impact overall than Shugo did.
And I think that you watched that game directly, and
I did.
what I was speaking towards was mostly the previous games that they've played together. It seems like Shugo Tenshi doesn't really play necessarily to carry the team, although he can definitely have a massive impact. It seems like he plays more to support Church of
Yeah, I
Rango.
mean, he's definitely trying to facilitate Church of
Hmm.
Rango a lot more, but I think the Forgotten, you know what I mean? I think Forgotten's the one that's being facilitated for his team.
Yeah,
So
and, and
it really came across when they played each other head to head. Like it just felt like Forgotten One was always the one pressuring the lane, always the one that had the advantage in mid lane,
mm,
and Shugo is really having to rely on Church of Rango coming to save him a couple times.
yeah.
And so in my mind, I would have Forgotten One 6th, and then I wouldn't even have Shugo in the top 7 person. Like I actually have
Who'd you throw on the seventh?
I have Smitty JT in 7th.
Ah, okay. Smitty had a really good series this last week.
Yeah, he really performed in mid lane. Again, he's on BKT, which is kind of like what we've just determined is like the gatekeepers, right? Like they're kind of the
Yeah,
ones like bullying the lower end. So again, like I think Smitty struggles against some of the higher competition. I'm
yeah.
going to be really interested to see. I don't know if Bucky's has played Oasis yet. I don't know. I'd have to go. I'd have to look
I'll
at it.
take a look. You'd be
Um,
interested to see what happened if they did play though.
but yeah, if like Smitty JT goes heads up against Forgotten One is really a matchup I'd like to see because I think Forgotten One is kind of in the talks with like Rendleman, Buckby, Diamandis. You know what I mean? Like he's
Mhm.
in those talks of being like one of the top. Again, he got bullied by Chitin, so I don't think he kind of, you know what I mean. So I think Buckby and Rendleman kind of and BTG kind of have the edge on him there. Um, but I don't think they've played against I don't think he's played against Diamandis, and I think they still have that matchup coming later this season.
I
So you
think
know
they
what I
actually
mean?
have it next week, if I'm
Oh, okay.
correct.
So
You're
you know
talking.
what I mean?
Which one are you talking about again?
Like
You're talking.
Forgotten One with Diamandis, and then
Okay.
Smitty JT is also in the same conversation. Where I think Smitty JT has the quality to be in that top conversation.
Yeah.
But it's
So
gonna
Smitty
really.
JT is going to be playing Diamandis next week. Clown Gaming versus BKT.
So yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I feel like that's gonna be a really big tell of like how good Smitty JT really is. You know what I
mm.
mean?
And then we will eventually see Oasis versus BKT, but that's going to be in week 12. So we got a little ways to go before that, and we should have some more information going into that matchup to kind of show us which direction that's going to go.
All right.
That being said, defending my pick of Shugo is just that I am a player that values consistency a lot, and Shugo is consistently decent, consistently relatively good at what he does, and consistently facilitates the players in his game.
Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, again, my argument is kind of the same thing I had with Zeratul, right? Like
yep.
where he's very journeyman-like, where he's getting the job done that you need him to do, but he's not
Mhm.
really ever gapping the opposing mid laners, not really doing that much else, right? Like he's just kind of facilitating, and that's all he does.
Yeah, but that facilitation has gotten them into third place, and it is powerful. Not everybody on the team can carry, unfortunately, and some people have to realize that their role is to. I mean, Shugo's had a couple of games that he's popped off on, but I think that he mostly plays for that role of, I'm going to facilitate the team and get them into a good position.
Yeah, I mean, I think my big issue with Shugo is like I've seen him get leads early on in the game and then do nothing with them.
Yeah. All right, well, with that being said, we ready to move on to the bot lane?
Yeah, let's go for it. So again, we both consensus or Mocha Dog number 1. I think he's just shown that he's a quality ADC. His team plays through him. He takes that pressure, takes the resources, and just wins games.
Then I'm going to put a disclaimer out there real quick. I think that ADCs is the one that I put the least amount of time into in deciding. I was impressed by some of the people that I ended up watching this week, and I mostly just plugged and played a lot based off of who I thought performed well this week.
Yeah, so this one, like, I have a lot of the same people in my top 7, but I've flopped them around a little bit more than what I think, you know what I mean? Like, I just have... Yeah. But again, like, I do have Mocha Dog and IQ of a Coconut 1-2. I think IQ is just showing, like, he gets his safe picks, he's going to perform. He's going to put up his decent... Like, he's never going to really carry the team on his own, but he's definitely going to facilitate your team towards the win, right? Like, he's going to give you...
He's going to
give you... he's going to give you the damage numbers. Well, the difference is IQ of a Coconut's going 7-0, where Shugo Tenchi is going like 5-4.
That's facts. Yeah, that's facts.
That being said, you have Photography Raptor at number 3. Why? Tell me why you have him above like Kisubi, Feint, Wild Goose Chase, Sex Goddess.
So when I think when you look at where he has been in the past, I think he was ranked number 2 last week, and I think there was a reason for it. He consistently puts up high damage numbers, consistently puts up good CS numbers, and then consistently is putting up relatively good KDAs. And when you look at the games that he had this week, he got a massive lead game too, and it just kind of ended up being difficult for him to do anything when he's getting dove by a J4 who's almost unkillable for a lethality Varus, and then potentially Renekton as well. So a lot of what happened in game 2 is not really to be laid at the feet of Photography Raptor in my mind. Although maybe that priority on the Varus is something that can be addressed as an issue, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean my big thing was when we talked, right? Like Photography Raptor, so his team had a 7-0 lead at 11 minutes, and 5 of those kills were on him.
Yep.
And he completely failed to translate that lead into anything mentionable. Like that was my big reason. So what I like the way I have the rankings, I actually have Kisubi 3, Feint 4, and then Photography Raptor 5.
Okay. So I wouldn't be. The only reason I disagree with that is because I think that Feint is kind of untested. They play against
I think I'm kind of
LCG.
leaning into the fact like I've talked to him a little bit, and I've seen him play outside of just in the league.
Okay.
I know how good of an ADC he actually is, and ADC is his main role. Like he was performing well enough to get in the power rankings for jungle, and that was his off role, right? And I think he's in his main role now, and he really performed when he did play his main role. So,
no, he's definitely going to be very interesting to watch. I could see him moving up the rankings in mine, but I still think that Photographer Raptor is a fantastic ADC. I think that he consistently gaps the ADCs he plays against in lane, and I think that translating that power across the map is more of a team issue than it is a Photography Raptor issue.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, I think Kisubi really plays to his team's strength and just winning team fights. Like, if you watch these team fights, Kisubi is just pumping out damage. Like, I'm pretty sure Kisubi had in both the games, I think Kisubi probably, like, I would be very surprised if he didn't have the most damage in both those games, because he was fucking shredding your guys' team in team fights.
I mean, he absolutely popped off and absolutely played really well after getting beat in lane by Photography Raptor. So that speaks to Kisubi's skill in that he was able to maintain.
Yeah, I do want to say that lead that Photography Raptor got was very heavily facilitated by Nightmare Hall. The Nightmare Hall spent the first, like he spent three ganks in about 12 minutes down in bot lane.
Oh yeah, like he gave a lot of attention bot lane, and it was decided that we were going to get our bot lane strong and try and play through that, and it worked. We got our bot lane super strong.
And yeah, you just weren't able to translate it. For me, I had, so you actually forgot to put a 7 on your power ranking, so I put Sex Goddess there just because I think he should be on there.
Thank you for that, by the way.
I would actually have Sex Goddess 6th in this. I was rather unimpressed with Wild Goose Chase for BDE. I feel like, again, he's very, like, we kind of talked about it, right? Like, he's going to be very consistent. I didn't really see him doing anything out of the ordinary. I didn't see him really forcing any extra action or really gapping his opponents, which Insomnia's bot lane was Chomp and Big One. Chomp and Big One actually took advantage of them a couple times as well. So, again, Chomp and Big One are people that I've had on the power rankings in the past. So they are a quality bot lane, but Wild Goose Chase really did not impress me.
Gotcha. And I think that, I guess what I was most impressed by was how the bot lane change was able to bring BDE back into the conversation. Now, true, they beat Insomnia Rising, who is now, according to our rankings, one of the lowest ranking teams. But if they are able to take those changes that they made, take the new direction that they're going with Yanks and Trisco, and actually make that the norm, then I think that they can stay in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think if they have a good showing against some of the teams that they're coming to play against, then I think that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
Like I said, I like Sex Goddess. I think he is a very quality ADC. He definitely showed that he played very well this week. Like, he was the reason his team won the game that they won against Pearl. He just, you know what I mean? Like, he's pumping out damage. He's doing a lot of things that Mocha Dog is doing. Just, I think Mocha Dog has a little bit better of a team around him and a little more synergy around him at the moment.
He also played Ezreal 3 games. So
True.
I can't give the man too many props because that champion is he's hard to have a bad game on.
Yeah, I mean, that's also why I, you know what I mean, like why I didn't bump him up the power rankings really. Is he did play Ezreal 3 games, which again, Ezreal's a champion in the game. He plays it well, so you can't punish
hate it
people
too much.
You
Yeah,
know what I mean? You
absolutely.
can't punish somebody for playing a champion well.
You are correct. You are correct.
Seventh for me personally would have been Induced.
Oh, man, see, I think I can agree with that, and I would have put Induced, but I felt like he was, taboo just because he's such a he swaps so many lanes.
Yeah, again, like he played this lane 2 weeks ago. I feel like like he's listed as the starter for ADC for his team. I feel like he's just trying to play whatever his team needs to win at the time. I think bot lane is his home, so I was willing to put him as number 7 for me. He's a quality player. Like he really puts pressure on other ADCs to perform well.
No, I agree. I think that he plays extremely well. There's nothing that Induce has not done well. I think he's had good showings in every single lane that he's played, and his best showings, in my opinion, have been in the ADC role. So I'm more than willing to begin incorporating him into the ADC ratings, as long as, I'm going to set this hard line right here, as long as he plays ADC next week.
Right. So next, let's go to support. I think that's the one where you kind of shook it up a little bit, but I think it probably could have got shooken up a little bit more if it was me doing it. Just because I feel like if you're calling out a player for having a bad game, they probably shouldn't be third on your power rankings.
So it is. I can agree with you up to a point. I think that everybody can have one bad game, and that is what Pop-Tart had, was one bad game. He's not been dominant, but he has been consistently good, consistently better than most. And I think that TFF being in first place, at the very least, Pop-Tart has some minimal level of contribution to that.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, like I'm not dropping Pop-Tart off the power rankings at all. It's just in my mind, I feel like probably Toop and Nakar probably bump above him after that game, after being
I could agree with you with Toop. I think Nakar, I'm still on the fence about Nakar.
I don't know. I think Nakar is like he's a big part of their team fights. Like, yeah, he doesn't have the strongest laning phase, but he definitely is the reason they have very successful team fights.
Okay, I can see that.
I'm a little bit out, like, I don't know, like Pajama Party Trash has kind of been in and out for me. He's been very he gets caught out a whole bunch.
Yes, he does.
Like he tries to get he gets a little far ahead of his team going for warding or getting to the dragon, and he gets picked for it. And he's been punished for it multiple times. Again, that being said, I feel like support is one of the weaker roles in the league overall. So I don't know who else we would replace him with. I'd have to really look critically at like who's been doing well.
Well, so
Um,
a key note is I did not bring Andromeda onto the
yeah,
list.
that was the one I was thinking of. Is like, but again, Andromeda didn't have a great week this week. It felt like
Exactly.
Sex Goddess was the one really forcing the action this week.
Sex Goddess was, and then I just at this point, so Sex Goddess and the Forgotten Ones were the only ones who were really showing up for OAL, or excuse me, Oasis. And I just feel like at this point, with the number of losses that they've had, yes, they've had an insanely tough schedule, but they have to show something before they can start getting further up the rankings.
Yeah.
It just otherwise it just doesn't make sense because it's almost like we are bashing our heads into a wall, begging them to get better.
Oh,
Oh,
Pop,
Pop Tart's a
Pop
female.
Tart's
I
female.
apologize, but I apologize, Diablo. I apologize, Pop Tart. Pop Tart, you are fantastic, and you are a female. You guys didn't remind us this time. Don't forget boomer memories.
So let's talk about why you put Warhead above Sad Lantern. I think it's pretty obvious why you did it, but
hmm
just walk me through it.
Well, Warhead has been consistently good, and Sand Lantern have been consistently good. I think that they've been vying for the top spot. Sad Lantern is a massive reason why NSGA does well, and he's a massive reason why specifically the bot lane does well. He, is fantastically good at what he does. He's good about um, remembering vision control, consistently has one of the highest vision scores in the league, and he is consistently securing leads in conjunction with Photography Raptor, of course. Um, However, Warhead had the better series, and I think that they are both in talks for the best support. And with Warhead having the better series this week, I think it bumps him up into the #1 spot.
Yeah, I mean, for sure with supports in the league overall, I think the top four, there's a huge gap after those four. Like
I will
would
agree with that.
I
Yeah.
would go as far as saying there's probably like a canyon between like the top four and the rest of the league when it comes to support play.
There was one that I would semi disagree with just based off of. Oh, never mind. Okay, never mind. I was wondering because I think Toop and Warhead both had a very similar showing this last week. And
Yeah. I mean,
wanted
they
to make
played
sure
against
were
each
in there.
other. They played
Yes.
against each other as well. So,
Yeah.
but that being said, like I think overall, like just if you go position by position, I think support's probably the weakest talent wise. I think mid lane you have a lot of top end talent as well, but you're
hmm
mid, like you know what I mean. Like you have a lot of top end talent, then there's kind of a gap, and then the mid
Yeah.
lane, then you have a bunch of like journeymen like Shugo Tenchi, um, you know what I mean, just like players of that ilk. I think top lane's kind of similar as well, like where you have a lot of some very good, you know what I mean. You have a couple really good ones, and then you have like a glut of like those journeymen, like gonna do what your team needs and perform okay. Jungle is the one role I think is probably the deepest in the league overall. Like jungle and bot lane or ADC are both very deep positions in general. I think you're going 7 or 8 deep, and you could go 7 or 8 deep in both those positions. And just
Yes.
depending on whose team is playing well, could end up being #1. You know
No,
what I mean?
fully
Like
agreed.
if we see TFF just take a nosedive, lose 3 in a row, you know what I mean? I think that would be directly because Diablo is struggling, right?
hmm No,
And I
I
think
fully agree. I think that when you look across, I think that top has a lot of pretty decent talent. I agree that it is a little bit top heavy, but when you look into the mid lane and you look into the ADC, or excuse me, when you look into the jungle and you look into the ADC roles, it seems like there are always people who are able to move up into the 7-6, like the 5-6-7 roles.
All right. That being said, I have one more big question for you before we end this.
Okay, what you got?
Who would be your top 3 MVP candidates at this moment?
Ooh, that okay. I'm going to put Diablo,
Okay.
Altazi,
Oh,
and
Altazi. Okay.
yeah, I think Altazi's up there. I think that he is consistently a. Oh man, actually, ooh, that's hard because I'm not going to put Altazi and Chitin. I have to put one or the two. I'm gonna put Chitin. No, no, fuck that. I'm putting Altazi. Altazi is the top laner. Top laners are the best. End of story. Altazi is one
Okay.
of them. And then I'm gonna put Mocha Dog in there too. I think that if NSG Pearl is able to challenge Agni Kai and or TFF, it's going to be on the back of Mocha Dog.
Okay. For me, I'm a little. So mine's a little. So I actually have Diablo. Um, I think you're going to be a little surprised. Like I think Church of Rango should be in the conversation.
It was 45-55 for me with Church of Rango and Mocha Dog.
Again, like it feels weird putting two junglers in there,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels weird having Church of Rango and like Aphid or Jungle Isn't Ruined in there as well. But I feel like Church of Rango is just more impactful for his team. I think Jungle Isn't like honestly, I'd probably like Jungle Isn't Ruined is very impactful for his team. He just doesn't quite have the same performances.
And
Like, you
his
know what I
team
mean?
kind of
Because
has
again,
additional players to fall back on.
yeah, I mean, he's kind of facilitating Chitin and Eltazi being number ones in their position, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it's a little harder to make him the MVP when you have two other players that could be considered MVP candidates.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm going like Diablo, Church of Rango, and then I'd probably say Chitin.
Okay, I can see that. I mean, Chitin, he's massively powerful.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason Jungle Isn't Ruined is playing through him, even though Jungle Isn't Ruined has been an MVP candidate himself. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, Chitin is a house of a mid laner. He showed that
Yes.
he can beat up the other really top tier mid laners as well. So, and then like honorable mention, like if we were gonna do like an honorable mention thing, like I mean, Mocha Dog's definitely in that conversation. BTG for TFF is also like, but again, like we've already got Diablo, so like I feel like
Yeah.
BTG's playing well, but I feel like Diablo's really the motivator for that team.
It's hard to
And
bring
then
multiple people in from a team. You have to give like one or the other.
oh, and then yeah, so I was top, and then Three Little Pigs suggested we do a top 3 players to watch. So
Ooh, so
who are
up
the
and coming.
players? Who are you the players you're really hoping to see kind of take off in the next like 2 to 3 weeks?
So I'm gonna do one from the support role because I think that is one of the weaker roles, but I think that the top 4 there are, as you said, canyoning the rest. And I'm gonna say Toop. Off after the game that Toop had, I think that he's currently in 4th place, but he has a lot of potential to jump up into, second, third, first place, depending on how well he plays. So Toop really impressed me with his game 2 against Agni Kai, and so I think that that's one player to watch. I think Faint is a player to watch. He had a fantastic ADC game, currently in 5th, and if he has another good game next week, I guarantee he'll be jumping up in the rankings. And who else?
Well, I mean, if you have to think that hard about it, you're not really expecting to watch much from them, are you?
Well, so I was just looking because there's a couple of them that I'm considering. So I was considering Three Little Pigs just for the shout out. However, I think that I'm going to go with Chicken. I think that Chicken has had a couple of good series, and I think that he could be the catalyst for BKT. So if he's able to show up, I think that he could be somebody that powers them up. Now, I want you to give me 3 Oasis names because we keep putting them on this ranking as high.
Oh, I mean,
And
I had one Oasis name, and I was going to give you
okay,
the forgotten one because I
yeah,
think that guy, like, especially if he's playing any of these other top mid laners anytime soon, that's the matchup you need to watch because that's kind of going to tell us how good he actually is.
agreed.
The other player, again, I think you like. I think Lando is another player to watch. Like he struggled
Ooh.
early on in the season. He kind of showed that he was kind of a playmaker early on, and then kind of fell off, and then now he's kind of making a comeback again. Like he had a really good week last week. So I'm really looking at Lando to see if he can kind of keep Echo rolling the way they're going. The other player I'm really looking at is going to be Buckby because he had a really hard week this week.
Oh. See, one
so
thing
it's
that
kind of
interested
of
me.
the opposite, right? Like you're looking at all these players going the upward direction. I'm looking at
Yeah.
Buckby like, well, he kind of fell off the truck this week, right? Like, let's see if he can get back on it and keep going the way he was before because he really struggled this week against
Yes.
Kai. Like he had a really good game 1, and then it just felt like his mental kind
Yes.
of got the better of him games 2 and 3.
I wanted to mention that I think that he has the mechanics, he has the playmaking potential, he has the ability. It's all about, in my mind, whether he has the mental or not. So is he gonna take that really hard loss to somebody who he's traditionally had a rivalry with and get back up, or do you think that he's going to crumble? And that's going to be really interesting to see.
All right. Well, I feel like that we should probably end it here. We're kind of starting to run a little long, but
yeah, for sure. All right. 10 15 minutes of that was us figuring out the way that we do this. I'm gonna have to like leave notes around the house or something, handwritten of course, never on
put a
phone,
bunch of
so I remember how to do this next
I'm gonna
week.
start putting post-it
But
notes all over my monitor, man.
yeah, for sure. That being said, signing off with another fantastic Divine Proclamation. Bubba Gumps over here with my what do we call it? We're not casters, are we?
Co-host.
Co-podcaster? Co-host with my co-host.
Yeah, and I do want to thank all the viewers that were interacting with us. It was nice to see you guys actually like reading the articles and paying attention and giving us feedback. We appreciate it. So that
Yeah.
being said, we will see you next week. Good luck in your games this week.
All right.
Are we muted?
Let me make sure.
Definitely not.
So bad at this.